If you've ever taken a biology class before, you were probably forced to learn about glycolysis. And if you're anything like me, you may have wondered why. But most teachers teaching glycolysis just bore you with biochemistry, enzymes, and substrates instead of telling you why it's important. And that's exactly how you forget everything right after the test. But believe it or not, glycolysis has real practical applications that you can use once you understand the process. If you're already a glycolysis expert, skip here for the practical applications, but if you need a short refresher, I got you. Glycolysis is the metabolic process your body uses to break down glucose or other monosaccharides and is part of one of 3 energy systems in your body. It occurs in the liquid cytoplasm of the cell over 10 enzymatic reactions and 2 main stages, the investment phase and the payoff phase. In step 1 and 3 of the investment phase, a phosphate molecule from ATP is added to the glucose. This is the 2-ATP investment. This causes the glucose to split into 2 molecules, leading into the payoff phase. In step 6, the first payoff is 2 high-energy NADH molecules, then 2 ATP molecules in step 7, and finally 2 more ATP and 2 pyruvate molecules in step 10. So we're left with 2 NADH molecules, a net 2 ATP molecules, and 2 pyruvate molecules. All of this happens without oxygen, but can lead to the Krebs cycle or fermentation, depending on whether oxygen is present. Now, how is this information actually useful? You know how people will argue that carbs are the enemy and need to be eliminated from the diet? Well, glycolysis is the exact reason that isn't true. Because glycolysis can only run on simple sugars, your body needs a stable source of them, exactly where carbs come in. But this is where people usually push back with, actually, carbs aren't essential because my body can make its own glucose. And while, yes, that's true, your liver can build glucose from protein and fat through a process called gluconeogenesis, there's a few major drawbacks. It costs more energy than glycolysis gets back from it, it's really slow, and if your body is short on other energy sources, it will pull raw materials straight from your own muscle. Glycolysis, by comparison, will run almost instantly off glucose and glycogen that you get from the carbs you eat. That's the difference. You don't technically need carbs to survive, but if you want the most efficient fuel for sprinting, lifting heavy, or pushing into anaerobic efforts, carbs do it best, and that's explained by glycolysis. If you've ever pushed yourself during those efforts, you've probably felt the burn, or what people call lactic acid. Your body needs to continue producing energy while low on oxygen, so it uses a process called fermentation to sustain glycolysis. And yes, it's the same basic category of processes that makes alcohol, but just a little different. You've probably heard this called lactic acid, as I mentioned, but that's not what's happening. The process actually converts pyruvate into lactate, using up NADH from earlier in the process. The burn comes from hydrogen ions released as your muscles burn through ATP. In the moment, there's a limit to how long you can push through that burn, but over time, your ability to clear and buffer those hydrogen ions actually improves. This is one of the reasons why interval training and progressive overload are powerful training strategies. They allow you to tolerate hydrogen ions more effectively and burn out later. There are still many other applications that they never tell you about. For example, some cancer cells become almost entirely dependent on glycolysis for energy production through a process called the Warburg effect. This is exactly what PET scans use to determine if patients have cancer. And while most people who say they have a slow metabolism aren't really getting it right, there are rare genetic enzyme defects that can affect the pathway, some causing serious blood disorders and others causing severe exercise intolerance. And foam rolling, stretching, or cool downs to flush out lactic acid after exercise, that's another misunderstanding relating to glycolysis and fermentation. If you'd like a more in-depth look at any of those mechanisms, make sure to subscribe and I'll cover them in a future video.